a more complete interpretation of a dream that the Lord gave me. So I put out a video yesterday about a dream I had. And in that dream, I was sitting in a room, and this room, as far as I could tell, it was lined with books. From the ceiling to the floor, just bookshelves all over the place. And in different parts of the room, on parts of the bookshelves, there were these very large crystals. They were like pinkish with little bits of white, and they were standing there like giant paperweights or something, door stoppers. And I was sitting there. I think I was sitting on a desk. Again, behind me, it just completely all the way around the room, bookshelves floor to ceiling. So there's books behind me. And I'm talking to a small number of TIs. And I'm trying to explain to them something related to basically relying on the Lord to carry them through all of this targeting in a safe, sound, sane, smooth, successful way, in a way in which the Lord would make their lives get better and better to the point of thriving as the months and the years pass. And some TI, and all the TIs are in agreement with him. Some TI says, him or her, I don't know. Some TI says, so what are these crystals all about? What do they have to do with helping us, navigate our way through life as a TI? And I tell them something like, I don't know. I was like, God can use these crystals as a false arm. Like if a person had their hand lost, cut off in an accident or something, then they would get a false limb. The name of that escapes me right now. I was like, God could use that to put on a new hand if he wants. So a fuller interpretation of that dream is this. The books in that room represent the wisdom of God. I represent me. The TIs represent TIs. The crystals, these crystals, they represent a false interpretation of what TIs have been labeling me as, and it's been their excuse to not follow the wisdom that God has given me that makes this program a joke, because the Holy Spirit of God fights it so strongly for me. But you guys have treated me as though what I have taught you is Eastern religion. So the first thing that I have taught you is that you have got to stop robbing God. You've got to start paying your tithes and offerings. You've got to start helping the poor. Malachi chapter 3 says, if you don't pay your tithes and offerings, you are robbing God. Don't expect for God to bless you. Matthew 25 says, I was hungry and you did not feed me. I was thirsty and you did not give me to drink. I was naked and you did not give me clothes. I was a stranger. Some Bibles translate that homeless stranger. And you did not take me into your home. I was in the hospital. You did not come for me. I was in prison. You did not visit me. And then Jesus cast them to hell. But what you guys are saying is you're treating it as though I've created some kind of a weird religion. And you're attributing it to basically Eastern religion, this whole thing where God makes my life awesome. He makes my life awesome in the midst of all this targeting. But you TIs have rejected it and you try to label it Eastern religion. 2, I've told you, beautiful born again TIs, the Lord wants me to be in constant contact with him through prayer, many ways. But one thing that he wants me to do is to meditate on the word love written in light. And I do my witching hour videos to explain the spiritual battle that goes on as I'm praying to God, particularly during their most unholy hours, which is 12 midnight to 3 a.m. And what you TIs have likewise done, just like with the crystal in that dream, those crystals in the dream, you have interpreted that to be an Eastern religion, New Age. And you're wrong there again. I prayed for another TI in another state, praying in tongues, meditating on the word love written in light, which is the way God has made an agreement with me or has led me. The Lord told me, you were to meditate on the word love written in light. I done told all y'all TIs, they can't stand you meditating on love, thinking about love. They can't stand that. That's even if you're not a Christian and you're not meditating on the word love written in light as two fundamental attributes of the Most High God of the Bible. God is love. God is light. This came from God first. The New Age movement and light and love and cultic mysticism and all this stuff, that comes from Satan mimicking God. God is love and God is light. When I prayed for this TI in another state, in the way that I just described, this TI was hit with a type of DEW where if you turn off the lights, you could see little sparks hitting on their body. The Lord began to, the Holy Spirit of God began to manifest himself in that other state that I was praying across the country with this person over the phone. And these DEWs began to fall away from their body. They were no longer making contact with their body. Okay, they were still happening. God said, you will go through the fire and you will not be burned. You will go through the rising waters and you will not be overwhelmed. But you will have to go through them. So they were still seeing them, but they were no longer affecting them because they were no longer making contact with their body. That was the Holy Spirit of God manifesting. That was not me. Later on, that TI tried to refer to me almost as though I were some kind of an X-Men, as though I have power over these DEWs. I do not. That was prayer. That was the Holy Spirit. That was obedience to God, meditating on the word love written in light. And many of you TIs, you have determined in your heart, no, that's Eastern religion. I'm not going to practice that. It's not. Eastern religion is mimicking God. Jesus said, Satan cannot fight Satan. You cannot use Satan, this whole thing of an angel of light. Satan doesn't like light. He can present himself as an angel of light, but that's not typically what he does. God is light, and in him there is no darkness. You cannot fight Satan with Satan. I cannot use Satan to protect this other TI so that these DEWs are no longer hitting their body. Jesus said that. You cannot, Satan does not have a divided kingdom. He cannot fight himself. That was the Most High God, the Holy Spirit of God. But you TIs, just like in this stream, you've dismissed everything on my channel. You refuse to pay tithes and offerings. You refuse to help the poor. You make lame excuses. You have money for cable, memberships, subscriptions, eating out, when eating it is cheaper, healthier, and generally tastier. Vacations, new clothes when the clothes you have are perfectly fine. You can afford all that garbage, but you can't afford to save people in the third world who might starve to death through reputable charities such as World Vision. You refuse to make your life a living sacrifice like Jesus said we are to do. You ain't going to do it. So you'll demonize me. You'll treat it like it's not even in the Bible. It's throughout the Bible that we are to help the poor. And then in terms of meditating on the word love written in light, it will drive you crazy. I got to admit, sometimes I thought, well, is this worse than the targeting? It's not. At times, it may a little bit seem like it was. But this same TI, when they begin to see God manifesting and taking authority over the DEWs they were being hit with, this TI initially took it for what it was. It was the Most High God taking authority over this program. And they began to meditate on love. And I told them, you must do it constantly, and they will fight you constantly. They will target you harder when you're doing it. Even if you're not a born-again believer, if you meditate on love, they will fight you. They hate that. This TI, because they witnessed God working, they begin to do it. But after a few days, it became so annoying to them, in large part because the TI program fights them so hard, targets them so hard to try to get them to stop thinking about love, they gave up. Then a few days later, they tried to attribute it to me as though I stopped the DEWs. I have no power over the DEWs. The Most High God, Adonai, Elohim, he's the one who stopped these DEWs for them. I began to see visions, and as all of this was happening, I began to see visions. God began to let me see what was going on in Cheyenne, and how some of the TIs in Cheyenne, they have enough respect to not target, to not hit a pregnant woman, or in this case, a woman who just had a newborn baby, and they're hitting her and the newborn baby with DEWs. They were targeting me while I was praying for this woman. And God began to let me see into their world and what they were saying. And one woman who is an agent of this program, who has a young child, she said, I'm not going to attack that faggot as long as he's praying for that woman and that little baby. I don't give a fuck about that black faggot. He could die for all I care. But I do care about that little baby. I think that's fucked up, and you guys shouldn't be targeting him as long as he's praying for that baby. And there were a couple of other agents in Cheyenne who were saying the same thing. Others were saying, I don't give a fuck about that black faggot or that bitch and her little baby. I want to destroy that motherfucker, and I want to destroy that bitch and her little baby as well. They were having a war in Cheyenne. There's people in Cheyenne who are agents of the TI program who have a little bit of heart, a little bit of decency, enough to not target a newborn baby and a new mother. God began to open my eyes to see what was going on, and my mind was blown. You guys have interpreted what God is doing in my life. You've interpreted it as mysticism or New Age or whatever, and you're wrong. And you're missing out on the wonderful life God has for you. The same wonderful life God's given me because of everything I told you, with tithes and offerings and prayer, meditating on love consistently, not as a New Age concept, as the fact that God himself says that he is love. God himself says that he is light. You are meditating on the God of the Bible. John describes Jesus as light, that he came into the world, that he's light, and that he became flesh, and that he is the Word. Follow what I'm saying, and God's going to make this program, this TI program, a joke for you. Don't, and you can continue to be stressed out, anxious, miserable, constantly going from tragedy to tragedy, being pushed close to the edge all the time. That's up to you. God bless.